طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. Alhamdulillah, continuing along with the Da' wa Dawa by Ibn Qayyim, the sickness and the cure, or Al-Jawab Al-Kafi liman sa'ala an al-Dawa al-Shafi, the sufficient answer for the one who asked about the complete cure. And last couple of lessons we talked about the gateways to sin. So if anybody can recall them for me, inshallah. If anybody, the thoughts was one, yeah, mashallah. Speech we covered so far. No, the look, the thought, the speech, and the step. Okay, and I don't think we covered the step yet. We'll talk about that today, but basically those are the four major gateways to the sins. That the main sin he's talking about in this case is sexual sins, in terms of adultery or fornication or homosexuality or bestiality or whatever the sexual sin may have been. These are the main gateways to that. So it starts sometimes with the glance or the look, and then it could turn into thinking about it or thoughts, and then it turns into the actual talking about it or getting closer to it, and then that's the step that you take towards it, and it confirms it or denies it. But those are the four main gateways the Imam was talking about. So we talked, alhamdulillah, about the sight, the thoughts, and the tongue or the speech. And today, inshallah, we'll start with the last gateway, which is al-khatwa, or the step. وأما الخطوات فحفظها بأن لا ينقل قدمه إلا فيما يرجو ثوابه فإن لم يكن في خطاه مزيد الثواب فالقعود عنها خير له. So the step basically is to prevent yourself from taking a step forward unless that step will lead to something that's beneficial or blessings. If it's not going to lead to blessings, then you should prevent yourself from taking any further steps. فالقعود عنها خير له. Sitting down would be better for you than walking towards it. ويمكنه أن يستخرج من كل مباح يخطه أو يخط إليه قربة ينوي بها لله عز وجل فتقع خطاه قربة لله. Also, if you take a step, even if it's something towards al-mubah, or something that's permissible for you, like it's not necessarily a good deed, but it's something that's regular mubah, you can turn it into a good deed by your niyyah. So for example, visiting a friend, if you turn it to the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you want to visit this friend for the sake of Allah, all the steps you take towards that friend is blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you want to go and purchase some food, for example, that's mubah. But if you have the niyyah that I'm getting this food so I can eat halal and strengthen my body so I can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or I can bring this food home to my parents, or I can bring this food home to my siblings or my children, you can get the niyyah, with your niyyah, rewards from Allah. So the khatwa, the steps taken forward, should only be to something that's pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if it's mubah, you can change your niyyah to make it to something that you get rewarded for as well. And if it's something that is going to lead you to haram, like taking a step forward, this place will put me into an environment that's going to be haram, then you should sit down. It's better for you than taking steps towards it. And then he quotes he says that the steps كانت عثرة عثرين أو عثرتين عثرة الرجل وعثرة اللسان جاءت إحداهما قرينة للأخرى في قوله تعالى وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا وإذا خاطبهم الجاهلون قالوا سلاما. So he's saying that the step, the false steps are two kinds. The step of the foot and also the step of the tongue, basically. And he says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put them together in an ayah where he says the servants of Allah الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا, they walk upon the earth humbly, the steps, walking. وإذا خاطبهم الجاهلون قالوا سلاما. And if the ignorant ones speak to them, they return salam. So their steps, the mu'mineen, the believers, Ibadur Rahman, are associated with good steps in the service of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and good speech, right? But the awliya shaitan, they're walking towards evil or they're speaking evil. So we do the opposite of that. وهذا كله ذكرناه في بين يدي تحريم الفواحش ووجوب حفظ الفرج وقد قال صلى الله عليه وسلم أكثر ما يدخل الناس النار الفم والفرج. He said, and all of these things that we put forward, these four gateways that we discussed in detail that lead to sinfulness, lead to haram, are basically for us to stay away from the fawahish, the evilness, the lewdness, sexual misconduct, and to protect our private parts. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said the most things that enter the people into the hellfire are the mouth and the private parts. Then he goes and he mentions many of the ahadith. We'll quote a couple of them inshallah to talk about the evilness or the gravity of this effects of sinfulness of fawahish or sexual lewdness. عن سعد ibn عبادة رضي الله عنه قال لو رأيت رجلا مع امرأتي لضربته بالسيف غير مصفح فبلغ ذلك رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال تعجبون من غيرة سعد والله لا أنا أغير منه والله أغير مني ومن أجل غيرة الله حرم الفواحش ما ظهر منها وما بطن. So Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu anhu, one of the great Sahabis, he said that if I had heard a person was with my wife, like a man was with my wife, I would strike him with the sword. In another narration, I would strike his neck with the sword. Right? And then this came back to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, are you like surprised at the jealousy of Sa'd? I am more jealous than Sa'd and Allah is more jealous than me. And for that reason Allah has made forbidden the haram, the apparent haram and the inward haram, the fawahish. Also in another authentic hadith narrated by Bukhari and Muslim, لا أحد أغير من الله من أجل ذلك حرم الفواحش ما ظهر منها وما بطن ولا أحد أحب إليه العذر من الله عز وجل من أجل ذلك أرسل الرسل مبشرين ومنذرين ولا أحد أحب إليه المدح من الله ومن أجل ذلك أثنى على نفسه. That there is no one more jealous than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and for that reason He has made the zina or the fawahish haram. And there's no one who is more beloved to Him, having an excuse, than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for that reason He has sent messengers as givers of glad tidings and warners. And there's no one that prefers to be praised more than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and for that reason He has legislated or He has praised Himself. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Also in As-Sahihain, Bukhari and Muslim, after the Salat al-Kusuf, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Ya Ummat Muhammad, Wallahi innahu la ahadan aghyaru min Allahi in yazni abduhu أو تزني أمته يا أمة محمد والله لو تعلمون ما أعلم لضحكتم قليلا ولبكيتم كثيرا ثم رفع يديه وقال اللهم هل بلغت. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, O nation of Muhammad, there is no one that is more jealous than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than his male servant or female servant should commit fornication. And O Ummat Muhammad, if you knew what I knew, you would laugh a little and you would cry much. And then he raised his hands and he said, have I delivered the message? Also the Prophet ﷺ said, من أشراط الساعة أن يرفع العلم ويظهر الجهل ويشرب الخمر ويظهر الزنا ويقل الرجال وتكثر النساء حتى يكون 50 الامرأة القيم الواحد. He said that from the signs of the day of judgment, that knowledge will be lifted up. So there will be less scholars, there will be less knowledge upon the earth. And ignorance will be widespread. And intoxicants and wine, alcohol, etc. will be drunk. And fornication will be out in the open. And the men will be few and the women will be many. In some narrations, up to the point there will be 50 women to every one man. وقد جرت سنة الله سبحانه في خلقه أنه عند ظهور الزنا يغضب الله سبحانه وتعالى ويشتد غضبه فلا بد أن يؤثر غضبه في الأرض. He said that from the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that when the zina and the fawahish are spread upon the earth, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's anger increases. And with the increase of Allah's anger, there must be some type of effect seen upon the earth. In another narration by Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he said, ما ظهر الربا والزنا في قرية إلا إذن الله بأهلاكه. He said that بأهلاكها, that zina and riba, interest, usury, are not prolific in a society except that Allah has sent down or will send down or gives permission for His punishment to come upon them. And then the Imam, he goes into great details about, the sin and evil effects of illegal sexual conduct, and he talks about the many ayat and the punishments for it, and etc. The main point is that in Islamic law, and even in the Sharia before us, like in the Bible and the Torah and the Injil, if you look at and you read it, even to this day, the sins of fornication, adultery, homosexuality, bestiality, pedophilia, all these sins are mentioned in the past books, and they are all have some type of punishment in these books. So in an Islamic state, obviously, there would be, forbiddance to do this, and there would be consequences if the people were to do it and get caught for it out in the open. However, we live, in the Western societies under Western laws that we have to abide by. So it's not really applicable to get into the great details in the debate between the ulama and the fuqaha about the punishment for these issues. The main thing is how we can, as Muslims, prevent ourselves from falling into it. So I skipped a little bit, but that's a summary of it, basically talking about the punishment of it and the evil effect of it. We mentioned some of it briefly. The main point is, if one of us, may Allah protect us from that, or someone we know falls into it, how can they save themselves? The main point is to make tawbah, right? So he says, after discussing in the great detail about the sins, because some scholars say that if a person falls into such and such sin, there's no tawbah for him, like, khalas, it's over. But the Imam says, التحقيق في المسألة أن يقال إن تاب المبتلى بهذه البلاء وأناب ورزق توبة نصوحا وعملا صالحا وكان كبره خيرا من صغره وبدل سيئاته بحسناته وغسل عار ذلك عنه بأنواع الطاعات والقربات وغض بصره وحفظ فرجه عن المحرمات وصدق الله في معاملته فهذا مغفور له. Basically, if a person makes sincere tawbah and he stops himself from doing these evil sins, and he changes for growing, like as he gets older, he starts getting better in deeds and leaving the bad deeds. He turns his bad deeds into good deeds. He has his good actions with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he lowers his gaze and protects his private parts. If this person makes sincere tawbah, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive his sins. That's the correct opinion after all that, no matter how great the sin. Because he said even from kufr or shirk or sihr, these things that were the greatest of sins, if a person makes tawbah, Allah accepts from it. So the sexual sins as well, if a person falls into it or has committed it, then he makes sincere tawbah, Allah will forgive him, inshaAllah. And Allah says, قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ جَمِيعًا إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. O servants that have transgressed upon themselves, do not lose hope from the mercy of Allah. Verily Allah forgives all sins, and Allah is the all forgiving, the all merciful. So never lose hope from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and always renew your tawbah. So, yes.
It says أسرفوا على أنفسهم. Does that differentiate between sins that are في حق العباد? Does that also include sins that are transgressing upon someone else, or is it only the sins that are between a person and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
It's for any sin. If you make a tawbah from any sin, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives it. However, we mentioned previously that if you had done or committed a sin violating the rights of somebody else, you have to return that right, in one way or the other. So if it's financially, you've taken advantage of somebody, you have to go and return that money to that person. If you can't afford to do so, you can't find the person, then you can give it to sadaqah or make dua for the person, right? Or to his offspring or to some family member. If it's a right of honor that you've backbited the person, you should go and, if it's not going to cause a greater fitna, to seek forgiveness of that person, and if you can't do that, it might cause a fitna, then at least speak good to the people that you spoke bad in front of about this person, to try to amends for it. But yeah, in general, it's all sins, but the sins of the people, that's an extra right in tawbah that you have to address as well. Because we mentioned before, you don't want to be like the ones on the Day of Judgment that come with mountains of good deeds, but they backbited such and person, or they slandered such and person, or they took the right of such and such person, and then that person will come and take all their good deeds, so they're left with nothing. And then that person will start giving them their bad deeds till they get thrown into the hellfire. May Allah protect us from that. So that's basically the gateways and the ways that lead to that. And now he talks about the cures for these type of sicknesses. In general, he's talking about, like he mentioned in this chapter, the cure for the issues of homosexual acts, right? But this can be applied to any type of sexual act if you follow the advice. So the questioner asks, فهل مع هذا كله دواء لهذا الداء العضال ورقية هذا السحر القتال وما الاحتيال لدفع هذا الخبال وهل من طريق قاصد إلى التوفيق وهل يمكن السكران بخمر الهوى أن يفيق وهل يملك العاشق والعشق قد وصل إلى السواد وهل للطبيب بعد ذلك حيلة في بر من سواد. So basically he's saying that, is there a way out of this problem? Is there a cure for this sickness? Is there a ruqya type of reading for this type of magic that kills people? He's talking about the disease of the lust. And is there a way to be guided to a better path? Is there a doctor that can cure the sickness of his heart? And then the Imam, he answers in poetry, and very nice poetry, but it's difficult to translate. But he says, ولعل هذا هو المقصود بالسؤال الأول الذي وقع عليه الاستفتاء والداء الذي طلب له الدواء. He said, so maybe this question relates to the question that we started with at the very beginning of this book. Remember, we said the man, he wrote a letter to the Imam asking him, I'm tried with this sickness, I keep falling back into it, this sin. Can you please give me some advice so I can stop falling into this sin? So the Imam is saying maybe this sin could actually have been the sin of committing homosexual acts. That's the Imam is kind of insinuating from that. And he's saying, نعم الجواب من رأس ما أنزل الله من داء إلا جعل له دواء علمه من علمه وجاهله من جاهله. He's saying, yes, there is a cure for this. And as he started with in the beginning, that Allah does not send down a sickness except that He sends with it its cure. Whoever knows it, and whoever is ignorant of it is ignorant of it. So there is a cure for every sickness, whether it's physical or spiritual. It's a matter of us discovering it or not. That's the question. So he says the first part, to prevent falling into the sin, the cure for this sin is to stop it before it even occurs. You know, like they say, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure, right? If you can stop it before it even happens, that's the best way. So he says there are two main ways to prevent this. فأما طريق المانع من حصول هذا الداء فأمران. So the two ways, منافع غض البصر. The first one is to lower the gaze and to think about the blessings and the benefits of lowering the gaze. He's going to mention 10 points here. And the second way is to control the heart. You know, not let anything that's displeasing to Allah to enter into your heart, or the more you let something into the heart and the more you become attached to it, the harder it is to leave that sin. So if you block it off from the beginning, that's the way to cure yourself. So now he'll talk about the benefits of lowering the gaze. غض البصر كما تقدم فإن النظر سهم مسموم من سهام الإبليس ومن أطلق لحظاته دامت حسراته وفي غض البصر عدة منافع. So he's saying that lowering the gaze, as we've explained before, is a way to prevent the arrow from the poison arrows of the shaitan. Because the glance is like an arrow of the shaitan, right? And it can pierce the heart. So he's saying that whoever lets his gazes go wild, go free, he will bring to himself much regret. دامت حسراته وفي غض البصر عدة منافع. So there are many blessings. The Imam, he mentions 10 of them. أنه امتثال لأمر الله الذي هو غاية سعادة هو غاية سعادة العبد في معاشه ومعاده فليس للعبد في الدنيا وآخرة في الدنيا وآخرته أنفع من امتثال أوامره وما شقى من شقى في الدنيا والآخرة إلا بتضيع أوامره. He's saying the first and most important point for lowering the gaze is that you are fulfilling the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In lowering the gaze, you are achieving the rule of Allah. And whoever follows the rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will have happiness in this life and the next life. And whoever decides to go against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's commands or does his prohibitions, he will have misery in this life and the next life. The second benefit, أنه يمنع من وصول أثر السهم المسموم الذي لعله فيه هلاكه إلى قلبه. Lowering the gaze will prevent the poison arrow from entering into your heart. So when you lower your gaze, that's the way, like, you don't give the shaitan the chance to throw his arrows at you. The third one, أنه يورث القلب أنس بالله والجميعية عليه فإن إطلاق البصر يفرق القلب ويشتته ويبعده عن الله وليس على القلب شيء أضر من إطلاق البصر فإنه يورث الوحش بين العبد وربه. He's saying that the third point is that lowering your gaze will bring a closeness between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It will build like a special relationship and a special love. You'll feel like company with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The more you lower your gaze, the more you get closer to Allah. And he's saying that the more you let your gaze go free and wander and stare, he's saying that leads the doors to looking at those things that will harm you. And they will put a loneliness in your heart and a distance between you and Allah. The fourth thing, أنه يقوى القلب ويفرحه كما أن إطلاق البصر يضعفه ويحزنه. It will expand and strengthen the heart. When you lower your gaze, the more you lower your gaze, the more your heart will be expanded and happy. And the more you let your sight go free, the more you will have like weakness in the heart and grief. And we mentioned before, the more that you look at things, like the more you let your eyes go free, it becomes harder to control. Then the desire starts to build. And then when a person, he looks at all these things that he can't have, then he starts having depression and grief. Right? So he's saying lowering the gaze can prevent that. The fifth one, أنه يلبس القلب نورا كما أن إطلاقه يلبس ظلمة ولهذا ذكر الله سبحانه النور عقيب الأمر بغض البصر فقال الله عز وجل قل للمؤمنين يغضوا من أبصارهم ويحفظوا فروجهم. He's saying that when you lower your gaze, Allah will give you light and happiness. And the same way that if you let your gaze go free, go wild, Allah will give you darkness and shade, basically, that you can't see in. And subhanAllah, the Imam, he drew a beautiful conclusion showing that in Surah An-Nur, when Allah commands the believing men and the believing women to lower their gaze and to protect their private parts, right after that comes the ayat of Nur. Allahu nuru samawati wal ard, mathalu nuri kamishkat, fiha misbah. So there's a direct correlation between having the light of the heart, the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and lowering the gaze. It's a beautiful thing that Imam showed. If you go back and read Surah An-Nur, the ayat about telling the believing men and the believing women to lower their gaze, right after that is the beautiful ayat of Allah as the light of the heavens and the earth. أي مثل نوره في قلب عبده المؤمن الذي امتثل أوامره واجتنب نواهي وإذا واستنار القلب أقبلت وفود الخيرات إليه من كل ناحية. He said, so lowering the gaze brings the light to the heart of the servant, the one that follows Allah's commands and stays away from His prohibitions. And the more that one does that, the more goodness will come upon him. كما أنه إذا أظلم أقبلت سحاب البلاء والشر عليه من كل مكان. Just the opposite is true. If you let the gaze go free and look at anything haram, halal, you don't care anymore, you start looking at more haram, then the dhulma, the darkness starts coming upon you. You don't have that vision, you don't have that light anymore. Your heart starts becoming dark as well. So number 5, basically the benefit is having the light from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says also from that light you see the path of goodness more clear. Like the more light you have, just like if you're in a room of darkness and you have a flashlight, the stronger the light is, the more you can see in that room. So this dunya is like full of darkness, and the more you lower your gaze from the haram and more you focus on doing the halal and the khayrat, the more nur you have, the more you can see through this darkness, right? And Allah, He gives more. He's going to talk about that as well. The gifts that you get from this nur, from this light. The 6th one, he says, أنه يورث فراسة صادقة يميز بها بين الحق والباطل. That Allah gives the mu'min, the believer who lowers his gaze, firasa. We talked about firasa before. That's like the discernment the believer has. He can look at somebody and just see that person's good or that person's bad. He can see a situation and stay away from it if he knows there's going to be some harm in it. Like Allah gives him that type of discernment. والصادق والكاذب, he knows between the truthful and the liar. وكان شجاع الكرماني يقول من عمر ظاهره باتباع السنة وباطنه بدوام المراقبة وغض بصره عن المحارم وكف نفسه عن الشبهات واغتذر بالحلال لم تخطي له فراسة. So this Imam Shuja' al-Karmani, he was like the son of a king. He was considered a shah for himself. And he was one of the pious peoples of the past. And he has many beautiful statements. But relating to this paragraph where he says that the one who openly follows the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, like his outward deeds are in accordance with the sharia, following the laws of Islam. And his inward is always being checked, like he's always checking his intentions. Is it purely for the sake of Allah? He's watching his inward, he's watching, his spirituality. And he lowers his gaze. Alhamdulillah. He lowers his gaze upon the haram, like he doesn't allow himself to look upon the haram. And he keeps himself away from doubtful matters, shubahat. And he feeds from the halal. This person will not escape having the farasa, like Allah will gift him the farasa. If you have these characteristics in you, Allah will give you the reward of farasa. And that farasa is like I said, the person, the mu'min, he can know the good from the bad, the truth from the lie, the evil person from the kind person. This is a gift from Allah that many of the Salaf and the Sahaba radiallahu anhu used to have. They can look at somebody and tell them, right away, this person, even sometimes, like one of the narrations, he said, I see the effect of zina upon you. And the Sahabi was so surprised, like, how did you know? Like, he said, he didn't commit the actual zina, but he was looking at a woman. And just from that person looking at a woman that he shouldn't be looking at, I think it was Uthman or Umar radiallahu anhu, one of the two Sahabis, he saw this person, he said, like, I see the effect of zina upon you. So that's firasa. والله سبحانه يجزي العبد على عمله بما هو من جنسه من ترك لله شيئا عوضه الله خيرا منه. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he rewards a person in their action like with the same type of related action. So sometimes, for example, when you give wealth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he gives you more wealth. It's related to the action. You show kindness to a person, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he allows other people to show kindness to you. And he says that in the same thing, if you're lowering your gaze upon the haram, Allah will give you something even better, right? To see something beautiful. And he says no one leaves something for the sake of Allah except that Allah will return him something better. فإذا غض بصره عن محارم الله عوضه الله بأن يطلق نوره نور بصيرته عوضا عن حبس بصره لله. So if a person, he lowers his gaze for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will replace that brief little pleasure you might have gotten from seeing something haram, He will replace it with the light of Allah and the light to your heart. ويفتح عليه باب العلم والإيمان, and He will open the doors of knowledge and faith. والمعرفة والفراسة الصادقة, and He'll give you like the ability to know things and to have the firasa, the discernment to know right and wrong. And these are the gifts. لَأَمْرَكَ إِنَّهُمْ لَفِي سَكَرَتِهِمْ يَعْمَهُونَ. The opposite is the case for those who always, let their gaze go free and wild and look at the haram things. Allah will put a darkness upon them, and they'll be like in a state of drunkenness. They don't know halal and haram. They don't know what's good for them. They don't know the right people from the wrong people. And you can see, if you look at those people that have gone off the path, how did it start? It started with like looking, and then they moved to having company, and then they started doing the acts, and little by little they started leaving the good deeds, and then more and more darkness came upon them, less and less light, until the point that they don't know right from wrong anymore. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to protect us from that. So the seventh one is أن يرثوا ثباتا وشجاعة وقوة فجمع الله له بين سلطان النصر والحجة وسلطان القدرة والقوة كما في الأثر الذي يخالف هواه يفرق الشيطان من ظله. So the person who has lowered his gaze for the sight of Allah, Allah will give him strength and bravery, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give him like an authority and proofs against his enemies. Just like it's narrated in the one of the narrations that if a person goes against his lower desires, Allah will like take the shaitan away from him, from his shadow, because everybody has a shaitan always following him around trying to misguide him. But like Umar radiallahu anhu, when the shaitan saw him, he would go to the other side of the street or the other way, out of fear. So the Muslim, the mu'min, when he lowers his gaze for the sake of Allah, Allah returns to him strength and bravery and authority. And he says the opposite is true, that a person, if he follows his lower desires, lets his gaze go free, then Allah will put him into disgracefulness, dhilla, ومهانة وحقارة, like he'll put him down into being lowered and disgraced and basically almost like worthless. كما قال الحسن إنهم وإن تقطف بهم البغال وهمجهم بهم البراذين إن ذلة المعصية في رقابهم أبى الله إلا أن يذلوا من عصاه. So basically, like even the animals like look down upon this person, and the one who follows his lower desires and falls into sins, Allah has written that whoever goes against his will, Allah will disgrace him. Because true honor and true authority and true strength is with Allah. Allah says, وَلِلَّهِ الْعِزَّةُ وَلِرَسُولِهِ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Glory and honor is with Allah and the Messenger and the believers. Right? So if you go to anything outside of that scope, it's a way to get disgraced and lowliness. As Umar radiallahu anhu, he said in the famous statement when he was going to Jerusalem, he was riding upon the donkey, and the Sahaba was telling him, why don't you ride a stallion or a horse, befitting because you're the Khalifa of the, mu'mineen. And he said, نحن قوم أعزنا الله بالإسلام فلما ابتغينا العزة في غيره أذلنا الله. That we are people that Allah has honored with Islam. So whenever we seek honor in other than Islam, Allah will disgrace us. So a person seeking honor other than the pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will get disgraced, either dunya or the akhirah. And he says the ayat, وَلَا تَهِنُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا وَأَنْتُمْ لَعَلَوْنَ إِن كُنْتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. Do not, be downtrodden. Don't be fearful. Don't grieve. And you are the ones that are high, if you are truly believers. Al-mu'min, a true believer, he is always in the higher state. No matter what, like he doesn't disgrace himself. He doesn't lower himself to anybody except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even the poorest, humblest, weakest mu'min believer, he's strong in the sight of Allah, and he doesn't fear the creation. That's the izzah, that's the true, when you read the seerah of the Sahaba and how they interacted with even the leaders of Persia and the leaders of Rome, like these little, what they were considered at the time, this little nation that has nothing from the deserts. And he comes and he speaks to the leader of Persia like he's nothing, I didn't invite myself, you called me here, talking to him with authority. The Sahabi came into that castle, stabbing the carpet, in front of all the guards and everything. And then the prince or the king of Persia was so furious he wanted to behead him, but he couldn't because he was a messenger, right? And he wasn't scared at all. He was by himself there in front of all the armies and all the generals and all these people for the Persian Empire. And he said, the famous statement that we are a people that Allah has removed, from the darkness of shirk to the light of tawheed, worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and from the smallness of this world to the vastness of the next life, and we love death more than you guys love life, so we're not fearful of you. This is the honor of Islam. He had poor clothing, he had a stick, he was considered like an Arabian Bedouin that had nothing, and he's going in front of the leader of an empire and speaking this way. And there's many other stories too. Sometimes some of the pious predecessors, they would be under the threat of death to recant on some of their opinions or to say something is halal, that's haram. and they won't do it, even under a threat of death, and they never bow down, because they have the izzat of Islam. Right? That's the true Muslim, that's the true mu'min. The 8th point, أنه يسد على الشيطان مدخله إلى القلب فإنه يدخل مع النظرة وينفذ معها إلى القلب أسرع من نفوذ الهواء في المكان الخالي. He said that from the benefits of lowering your gaze is that you close the door for the shaitan to enter into your heart. Because the shaitan, he will enter into the heart faster than air will come into an open room. Meaning like instantly. As soon as he gets that chance, as soon as he has that space to enter, he will go in and try to corrupt the Muslim. That's his goal. We studied before in the past, in the chapter, how the shaitan has declared enmity to the child of Adam. His goal is to misguide the child of Adam and put him in the hellfire with him, because he is disgraced and he wants the children of Adam to be disgraced too. That's his goal. So any type of entrance he can have, he will go in there. And we said before that the eye is the entrance into the heart. It's a vessel into the heart. So if he can get through the eye, like looking into Ham, and get into your heart, he will do it to corrupt you. So lowering the gaze will prevent that, the Imam is saying. And the 6th point, أن يفرغ القلب للفكرة في المصالح والإشغال بها والإطلاق البصر ينسيه ذلك ويحول بينه وبينه. Lowering your gaze will give you time to think about those things that are beneficial for you. We've said before, from the beneficial thoughts the Imam is saying is to think about anything that will help you in your dunya or akhirah and try to accomplish it, and to think about anything that will harm you in your dunya and akhirah and try to prevent it or stay away from it. So when you lower your gaze, you free your mind more to think about more important issues. Right? This is the 9th point. You open you have more chance to think. When the person's gaze is always going all over the place and looking at haram, his mind becomes preoccupied. He can't think about the more important things. And that's what the shaitan wants. Even if he can't get you to do the haram, at least he wants you to think about it, right? To keep you preoccupied. Even if he can't, stop you from doing something mubah, maybe he'll keep you preoccupied with a mubah so you won't do something that's wajib or more beneficial, more rewardful. So always the preventing the sin before it even starts is the best route. And he says the ayah, وَلَا تُطِعْ مَنْ أَغْفَلْنَا قَلْبَهُ عَنْ ذِكْرِنَا وَاتَّبَعَ هَوَاهُ وَكَانَ أَمْرُهُ فُرُطًا. Don't look to those who we have caused their hearts to be heedless on our remembrance, and they follow their lower desires, and their affairs are lost basically. And he said, the Imam was saying that a person whose gaze is free to look at the haram and not care about that, all these 3 things will come upon him. His heart will become heedless, he will follow his desires, and he will be in a state of loss, or his affairs will be in a state of loss. But if you lower your gaze, you have time to concentrate on that which is good for you. You can focus on doing what's right and save yourself a lot of grief. Number 10, أن بين العين والقلب منفذا وطريقا يوجب الانتقال أحدهما عن الأخرى أو الآخر وأن يصلح بصلاحه ويفسد بفساده. So he's saying that there's a direct window from the heart, from the eye to the heart, and basically there's a direct correlation as well. Both of them, they affect each other. So if you have a corrupt heart, you will look at corrupt things. Or if you have a good heart and you look at corrupt things, it will make the heart corrupt. So there's a window there. He says you want to keep the window clear, right? Clean. And the best way to keep the window clean is not to let it get dirty in the first place. So lowering the gaze will prevent the dirt from coming into the heart. فإذا فسد القلب فسد النظر وإذا فسد النظر فسد القلب. And if the heart is corrupt, the sight will become corrupt, and vice versa. If the sight is corrupt, the heart will become corrupt. فإذا خرج العين وفسدت خرب القلب وفسد وصار كالمزبلة التي هي محل النجاسات. So the person who lets his eyes go more astray, the the dirt comes into it, like he's saying, like a trash can that's filled with filth and corrupt stuff. The more that the eye sight looks at haram stuff, the more the heart becomes corrupted. And unfortunately, like in our modern times, the access to looking at evil and filth is so widespread. Even a person who he wants to do good, his intention is good, sometimes he's bombarded with evil sights. So it's be very careful to not allow those sights to enter into your eyes first place, and then your heart more importantly. There's been so many studies, like for example the evil effect of pornography. How there's a direct relationship between what it does to the mind, certain chemicals it releases, and it gets a person addicted to these types of sites, and that leads to depression and leads to like other types of issues, or leads to sexual misconduct sometimes. So the sight, if you would not looked at that in the first place, you would be prevented for so many sicknesses. So the Muslim especially, he's always careful, especially in these times, to allow anything into his sight. You want to be on guard. Like we mentioned, we keep repeating ourselves. We have our hearing, our sight, our speech, and our heart. Right? All these things, we want to have guards upon them. So you don't want to listen to something, let something into your ear, your hearing, that's going to corrupt your heart. You don't want to let your eyes gaze upon something that's going to corrupt your heart. You don't want your thoughts to think about things that are going to corrupt your heart. You don't want to talk about stuff that's going to corrupt your heart. So always, inshallah, try to keep on guard, and we'll stop here for the adhan. I was thinking about the Madarij al-Salikin, which is like a book also by Ibn Qayim, talking about basically the steps of the seekers. So it's a beautiful book. Originally by Imam al-Harawi, he wrote like 100 levels between Iyaka na'budu wa Iyaka nasta'in, and each level is like a way to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Imam Ibn Qayyim came and basically like summarized it and explained it in a very beautiful manner. So that's one of the books I was considering. It's also with purifying the heart and getting closer to Allah. So this book was basically, I was hoping to talk about the sins and disease of the heart and how to get rid of them. The next book is basically like how to get to the higher levels. So either that or maybe like a book in fiqh or a book in hadith. I don't know. We'll see, inshallah. There's like 3 more classes till Ramadan, inshallah. Then we pause for Ramadan. So we can potentially finish the book in those 3 classes, or if you guys want to do something like especially for Ramadan, what do you think? Yeah, we can finish. It's definitely too. I just like sometimes it's good to do. I'll try to finish, inshallah. Maybe do like last lesson, like a little Ramadan prep or reminder, like inshallah, to get into the. جزاكم الله خيرا إن شاء الله. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك. بارك الله فيك.